Hello and welcome to the Service to School Stories podcast. You'll hear from veterans and partners who'll share their stories and insights about how you can use higher education to transition from the military and achieve your goals. Now let's get going.
We are back today with another episode with the incredible Annie Bahari. I'm really excited to chat with Annie today to share a little bit more about the data that we have here at Service to School and what we see from our applicants and our admissions partners in terms of what it takes a student to be a competitive and compelling applicant to a highly selective institution as a veteran. So for our listeners, my name is Sydney Mathis. I am our our CEO, actually. As of 2 months ago, I stepped into the CEO position. I'm used to saying Chief Program Officer on this podcast. But this is my second month in the CEO position. But I'm not new to Service to School. I've been around for about 5 years. Working mostly on the programming side, building out our support and resources for veterans. Brought on Annie several years back, and it's been so incredible to work with her, supporting our students. And now, having Annie take over that chief program officer role is just an absolute honor. She's incredible in this space, and excited to pick her brain a little bit more for the benefit of our applicants and for our listeners. So, Annie, how about you go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit more for our listeners too?
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me back. My name is Annie Behary. I am the Chief Program Officer. I am the new Sydney. Um, I've been here at Service to School for about 3 years and have worked um have leveled up, So I've seen the growth of the organization and also the growth of our resources for our applicants. So we're in a really great space now, I think, and we have so much more data to share with everyone. My background is in college admissions. I worked at a small liberal arts college in Pennsylvania, and then also at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. And I've done the admission stuff, the college counseling stuff. So we've seen it from both sides.
Yeah, I always joke I've sat on all four sides of the higher ed desk, in admissions and student affairs in a high school, and then now kind of on the college access and student support side. And it's been really, really fun to kind of bring all of those, lived experiences into our work here, and to do it with you. So excited to just continue doing cool and fun things for our students who are just absolutely inspirational. I told you before, I just came back from a trip in Boston, chatting with some of our students there at Harvard and MIT who are juniors. We spoke with a first year student, and they're just doing really, really cool stuff and excelling in and out of the classroom. So today we're going to chat a little bit about, what it takes for a student to get to, one of our partner institutions, with most of our schools being, I call them the bumper sticker or the sweatshirt sticker schools, right? The ones that everyone wants to wear, and tell everyone they're going to, but are still some of the most competitive schools in the country to get into. I think overall, most of our partners on their websites publish a single digit admit rate, and especially for transfer students where most veterans find themselves in the admissions process. So Annie, from your experience, managing the programming team over the last admission cycle. Since you came to Service to School and as of recent, what do you think are some changes you've seen in our applicants, either in, the academic preparation, what they are doing differently in their applications? What are some trends you've noticed?
I think the applicants today are coming in so much more prepared than previously. And or they're coming in prepared to do the work to get to the institution that they want to get to. And so that's been really exciting because they're working, there's an end goal and they know what that end goal is and they're willing to do whatever it takes to get there. And I will say that is what separates um, applicants who are really not just interested in the highly selective school, but can do really well there, right? Like they're willing to put in that amount of legwork. And that's the biggest thing. So now when we talk to applicants, I'm hearing a lot more, you know, I want to go to Harvard, or I want to study engineering at this highly selective school. Um, how do I get there? Right? I'm ready to go to community college, or I'm open to taking these kinds of classes, or I have taken calculus. There's a lot more, I think, awareness around the level of preparation that's needed, and a lot more willingness to do that preparation.
Yeah, that willingness to do the preparation piece, I remember years back, we kind of had to a student wouldn't necessarily take us seriously, or maybe they weren't excited when we said, "Hey, you should really consider going back to community college and taking some classes." And from my conversations, I feel like that I want to say stigma, but that kind of thought of taking a step back for community college has kind of watered down a bit, and now students are seeing that as a stepping stone. Would you think you're seeing more students come to us with that community college experience already under their belt, or do you think we're still seeing students come to us where we are encouraging them to go back to the community college route first?
I definitely think that they're coming to us with some amount of community college work, or they're coming to us fairly early, maybe before they've separated, uh, and they're open to the idea of community college. But I think if they're out of community college, and I do want to praise the community college system. It is an incredible resource for adult learners, for non-traditional students. There are high school students taking classes at community colleges, so they really serve a variety of populations, and it is one of the best resources that veterans or transitioning service members have to getting to that next step. Um, they really, really they set you up well. And another plug for community colleges, I was on the University of California website, um, and they give preference to community college students over other transfer students who are coming from four-year schools. So again, I think that shows that like the community college experience is valued by the four-year schools. They are giving um, they want students to go there and then transfer to their institution. So definitely, we're seeing that applicants are open to it. And there was that stigma, definitely. And then sometimes we still have it, right? We talk to applicants who are like, I don't want to go to community college first. But why? It's a great stepping stone. And really you need it, for the highly selective schools that want to see recent coursework.
Yeah, and I hear from students sometimes, where we get to that, okay, I'm open to going back to community college, but maybe which one? Or, an online program versus an in-person program. What is your advice to the student around selecting a community college that would prepare them? Or I think some students even see community college as, okay, well, is there a status of one community college over another? How do you help students kind of figure out where is that place to do that stepping stone?
Right. That's a good question. I've heard that too, that maybe like, is there like an Ivy League of community colleges? No, there isn't. The best community college is the one that is, one that is accessible to you, that is offering the coursework that you need to get to where you want to be. So no, there is not one community college that's better than another. If you were really invested in the outcomes, I would ask, where are these community college graduates going? What types of schools, and there might be a difference in advising resources. So you might go to a community college that is simply not familiar with applicants transferring to a highly selective four-year school. But that doesn't mean that they're not equipped to help you get there, right? It just might mean that they don't have many applicants who go there. Um, so be open, know that there are community college. The point is for you to get the relevant classes and to get good grades in those relevant classes. That's all you need. You don't need anything beyond that. Um, I did have an applicant who was in New Jersey, and he had the choice of two community colleges. He wanted to study Japanese, and one community college offered, Asian languages, and one didn't, and he had the choice. And we had a couple of phone calls about it because there were some pros and cons to each, and he ultimately did go to the further school that offered Japanese, right? And it made sense because that's what he wanted to study, and now he's preparing to transfer to a highly selective school. Um, so that's the kind of like that's where you can get a little bit more in the weeds about where you should be going. But other than that, there's not really one that's better than the other.
Yeah. I always tell students too, we want to get as close to apples when it comes to the academic experience as what the school you are hoping to transfer to is their teaching modality. So if they
Right.
only have in-person classes, then we want to get you as close to in-person, live taught classes as we can. Most community colleges are in person. Some do offer online options. But yeah, I agree. It's not like an Ivy League with community colleges, as you said. I think that's a great way to think about, or to dispel kind of that concern. I also heard from a student one time, he was, "Oh, well, I was reading, reviews of the professors at one community college versus another, and how is that going to, be reflected in admissions?" And I mean, Annie, correct me if you did differently, but when I was reading transfer applications for GW, not once did I look at the professor's name and go and compare it to, another student's professor's name. I was like, that's just not how admissions reviews files. If you're taking the relevant coursework at one community college, we trust, that the faculty there are trained and are, the experts in their fields to be teaching that course content. But I do think that there are students who are thinking towards that end goal and have really, honed in on what part of this process is going to be scrutinized, and which part of it is, something that is maybe outside of my control. And I truly do agree with you that, community college is the best first step, in academic preparation and showing preparedness. Most students that work with service to school apply as transfer students. I think something in the realm of like 80% of our applicants are submitting transfer applications. And to Annie's point, our data shows that strong academic preparedness leads to strong admissions outcomes on the transfer side. So our average admitted GPA for the last admission cycle was a 3.8. And that's in anywhere from 15 to 30 recent academic credits from a traditional community college. So for listeners, as you prepare, community college is truly a compelling and competitive path to a successful admission cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to say too that we sometimes have applicants who come to us who haven't started any coursework anywhere, and they're like, "Well, I want to be a first year student." And or my advice at least is probably you don't want to be a first year student, and the reason for that is it is so much harder to stand out in the first year pool. Um, so you have two things working for you for as a transfer. Like you said, most of our applicants are transfer applicants. It is a pool that is read with more flexibility. There is more understanding around transfer applicants than there is with the first year applicant, right? Who's gone the traditional route and they're 17, 18 years old. And so I think for almost all of our population, being a transfer student is the best way that you can stand out. And then also, highly selective schools are going to expect that you have coursework of some kind. They can't just admit you based on your high school transcript, especially if it's older than 2 years, 3 years. I mean, the student you are today is not the student you were back then. So, we recommend that you definitely go or, consider being a transfer applicant simply so that you can stand out more, show them more recent coursework, and sort of build up that profile a little bit if it's been some time since you were in school.
And speaking of building up a profile, let's talk about SAT and ACTs a bit. Just last week, we got an email that Princeton is going back to requiring test scores with the exception of for active duty service members. Um, so it will still be optional for anyone on active duty, but if you've already transitioned off of active duty and you are one of our students at a community college, for example, testing is now a requirement for students in that population. So it feels like in most admissions offices, the test policies are so nuanced. Like for at Yale, for example, test optional for Eli Whitney students, but for traditional transfer first year applicants, back to requiring test scores there. I know Stanford is back to requiring test scores. Most of our highly selective partners are back to requiring ACT or SAT scores. While there's still a large handful of service to school partners that will remain test optional for probably the future of their admissions. And a vast majority of colleges across the country are still test optional. And then test optional versus test free, right? Where the UCs, University of California system, will not review any test scores if you submit them. So that's the test free piece. But Annie, would just love to hear, more from what you're hearing from applicants. And then we can also chat a little bit about what testing looked like for last admission cycle, since we do have some data there too.
Yeah. Yeah, the testing piece is, I feel like the general sentiment is that it's kind of a bummer, because now you might have to test even if you're applying to just a handful of schools that require it, depending on your list. As that list grows more and more, and I think frankly it will grow, um, you'll have to decide whether you even want to apply to those schools, right? So it's a little bit of a sticky situation right now. I think our veterans or our population they're doing a great job of being aware. We've seen a lot of applicants come our way with testing or, studying for exams. We've heard from, our cohort members, for example, many of them have tested. And so they're right on track in terms of their timeline. And again, I think that's a part of the greater awareness of applying to a competitive college. They have to have certain things and they have to be ready. And they are. So that's always really great. But the testing itself, it's tough to juggle, right? Is it worth testing if you want to apply to just 2 highly selective schools, right? Yeah.
So for last admission cycle, so this is fall 2025 data, our average SAT score was a 1320, which is really great for students who've been out of the classroom, for several years. But I think that speaks to a lot of the soft skills and all of the determination of our applicants and that preparedness of knowing that these types of institutions are their end goal. And again, to your point, Annie, willing to do the work. 1320 was last year's average SAT score. Average ACT score was slightly below that. And that, I think, is honestly because we had fewer students submitting the ACT over the SAT. Our average ACT score was a 28, which, to our listeners, there is no preference in admissions of the SAT versus the ACT. Both exams have changed significantly over the last years. Feels like they keep changing them, just to even keep students on their toes. But ACT has an optional science section now, which I think we are hearing from schools that students should take the science section, although optional. Um, and then they are both online, which I think is opening up access, honestly. Students, especially our student population, don't have to go and test at a high school in a high school cafeteria anymore, which I imagine can feel a little wild. But to your point, Annie, I think we will continue to see schools, especially highly selective schools, and selective majors, going back to showing a preference for testing, if not making it flat out required. Um, and again, that's the average admitted SAT score of our students. So that certainly students have submitted above and below that. Same thing with the GPA. So my advice around testing is you should absolutely do practice tests. Service to School has a partnership with Princeton Review for test prep. And we are encouraging students, if you want to be a competitive applicant, to do the preparation and see, what your score shakes out to be. And if, you're not excited about the score, hopefully you've given yourself enough time to retest. Annie, what is your kind of rule of thumb around the number of times a student should take the SAT or ACT?
Oh, I think that there's data around this. I think your score is unlikely to increase in a significant way after 3, I think, and even 3 seems like, a lot of times to take a standardized test. So, definitely I think twice, first maybe you get the jitters out, and then the second you try to target, the weak spots, but after 2 or 3 tries, it's okay to call it quits. Testing is not gonna make or break whether or not you get in. And we say that all the time. A good test score, will it help? Yes. Um, it'll help solidify what the colleges will know already from your transcript, right? That you're a good student, that you're a strong student. It will not be the reason that they admit you. Even a perfect score is not the reason to admit. I'm sure you've denied a lot of perfect scores in your admissions career. So that's not the reason that they'll admit you. And then also a weak score, if there are ways that you can strengthen other parts of your application, it's not going to be the reason that they don't admit you either. So,
Right. There's very rarely one reason that a student is admitted and or denied. Um, so with that and testing, so we've talked a lot about numbers, GPAs, test scores, but we know there's a lot more that makes a student a compelling applicant, be it either time in service or letters of recommendation or essays. It's another one we spend a lot of time working with students on. Um, but let's talk a little bit about time in service, military, and the Service to School Vet Link Addendum, because I do think our partners see a lot of value in understanding the context of the service members' environment and the experiences that, they had in the military. For our listeners, neither Annie or I or are a veteran. I presented at a conference full of college admissions officers, and there were 2 veterans in a room of about 60. So, to lead this part of the conversation with admissions has no idea what it means to serve in the military. As a military spouse, I can tell you briefly what my husband's job was in the military. I'm sure, Amanda on our staff, she's a military spouse as well, could probably tell you briefly what her spouse does in the military. But most admissions professionals have zero context of the military experience. So talk to our listeners a little bit about how they can either craft that narrative or how admissions views their time in service.
yeah. So, like you said, there's almost no context. Admissions officers are largely people, I don't know, between the ages of like 25 or 24 and 30. I mean, these are young folk who have limited context around military service. And that's a part of what our VetLink addendum hopes to address. So the addendum allows you to talk about your military service in a demilitarized way. You can talk about it essentially kind of like a resume, right? You write about your jobs, your trainings, your experiences, any overseas assignments, things like that, in a way that like a layperson could understand. That is a way and that the colleges really appreciate that, I think, because again, it gives that context, right? It sort of puts your service into terms that they can understand and that they can use to extrapolate. Well, what kind of student is this going to be on our campus? So that's really one of the best tools that we have to kind of break down that service and really allow it to do some heavy lifting. Right? Because the college application is not designed for that. The college application, there's very limited space for you to write about your military service. And as a non-traditional student, as an adult learner, those are real life experiences, right? That like you learned something from them. And it's such a shame that the college application, even the transfer college application, doesn't give you dedicated space to do that, but the addendum does. So use the addendum for sure to sort of explain that. And there are other places in the application where you can describe your time in service, but I think this really lays it out in a way that an admissions officer can like, quickly understand what you've experienced.
Yeah. And I always hear from an applicant of, oh, well, I was just a insert name of job in the military, right? And I mean, I can't even tell you all the different jobs in the military, but for a service member to minimize, I was just a insert, job here. That is more work experience. That is a more significant life experience than most high school students have had in their entire high school career. So when I think about applicants saying, oh, well, am I as competitive as you know, I don't know, Navy SEAL? Admissions has no idea the caliber of one job in the military versus another. I think it all comes down to, let's talk about what you've learned. Let's talk about what your experience was. Let's talk about the takeaway. And it's those soft skills that we are always looking to glean, even from a traditional student's activity section, right? I'm trying to understand your service potential. I'm trying to understand your commitment to a community. I'm trying to understand your dependability, your determination, what drives you. And I can glean a lot of that from the VetLink addendum when you help me understand what those experiences in the military have been like. I always kind of use the example of, and Annie, I'm sure you could rattle off several too. Like, what are the top 5 leadership experiences a student in high school has? Right? It's like student body president, DECA president, varsity, captain of their team. Right? Like, they're all the same ones that you read over and over again on an application. And most high schools have those same experiences, but what most high school students don't have is like real work experiences and challenges that they've worked through that are of, I don't want to minimize, like a high school student's experience, because I do think there are absolutely high school students that have navigated challenges in their home and their communities. But to bring a lived experience like time in service to admissions is rare for an admissions reader. I mean, how many veteran applications, you know, does an average admissions office get? Where the veteran has a space like the addendum to clearly explain in a way that is made for that experience in an application. Probably few.
Right. Absolutely. Um, yeah, I think that there is such a natural discourse among our population to minimize that time in service. Well, what that doesn't really matter, right? Because I wasn't a good student in high school, or I'm not a good student, or I tried college and I didn't do well and then I enlisted or whatever. Um, and that's not the case. And in fact, like you said, uh, there's so much that you can pull from your service into your college application to show that readiness, that excitement to learn. And that's what I think is really interesting, because there's so many amazing traits that you can pull out of your service and put into a college application. But you can really also pivot to, and now I'm ready to learn, and now I'm ready to be a student. And that's a narrative that we see all the time among our population. There were weak students in high school, or, before joining the military, they had this time in service, and how you feel about your time in service is sort of irrelevant. You had this experience, and then, here you are ready to do something else, right? With all of this experience with you. Um, one thing that I always think about is the way that you can turn that some military experiences into or turn it into something for your application. So, for example, we worked with an applicant last year who was a medic, in the Army, and he applied as a biomedical engineering major to highly selective schools, and he was admitted to Harvard, and he wrote all about like being a medic and how he thought about ways that he could make, the equipment that he was working with as a medic better and more, efficient for, for like to carry and store, as in the military. So, he was pulling directly from his experiences. Now, that's a really clear-cut example, right? Because he's a medic. He wants to be a biomedical engineer. But I'm sure that there are ways that you can pull from your time in service to talk about what you want to study and why you want to study it, And if you don't know how to do that, any one of us would be happy to talk to you because I'm sure we can make that happen.
Yeah, that's why we're here, right?
Yeah.
So as we begin to wrap up, I hear from students all the time, does this work, right? I think our social media does an incredible job of telling success stories, but it almost feels like people are like, okay, well, what's the catch? So to run through some of our admissions outcomes from last year, and not to, highlight one specific school over another. But we had, several hundred veterans admitted to our partner schools last year. We had 56 veterans admitted to multiple service to school partners, which, Annie, you and I have been college admissions counselors for quite some time now. And to have a student choose between Cornell and MIT is unique. Uh, but yeah, total of 247 students admitted to a service to school partner. And last year alone, both Princeton and Yale had over 100 veteran applications. So that was really exciting. But, we have 31 veterans admitted to Princeton last year. And 21 who are going to Yale, which is just, you think about growing a veteran community on a campus. That's really impressive.
It's incredible because there's not one high school where 31 students are being admitted to Princeton.
Yeah, it's
There's not
good
one high
point.
school in the country.
That's such a good point.
So this is really incredible data. The opportunity is there. The resources here. We're ready. We're totally excited to help applicants get to that next step when they're ready, with the right preparation. But yeah, it's absolutely possible. I mean, we see it. We see it all the time.
Yeah, it's absolutely possible. I mean, I think that is the takeaway. If a student is truly motivated, if a student has a highly selective institution on their list, it is truly possible. We have students who are denied and go back to community college, do the work, and then reapply and are admitted every single admission cycle. So if the student feels compelled to, hang their hat on one of these highly selective institutions, which we do see, then, you have to be willing to put in the legwork to get there. But to Annie's point, it is possible. And then I also, want to ensure applicants understand that you do not have to go to a highly selective institution. You do not have to go to a bumper sticker school to be successful in life. It is not about where you go, it's about what you do when you get there. This conversation is more so catered to the student veteran who is wondering, can I see myself? Should I do the work? Or what does it even look like to be a competitive applicant to a school like MIT, like Princeton, like Stanford? Really, any of our admissions partners would be considered highly selective institutions. So, want to encourage students to think about their list broadly, to think about their list in an intentional way where it is outcome driven and that the name of the school is not, what they are aiming for, but a true academic experience that leads to long-term career success is the ultimate end goal. So with that, any last pieces of advice for our applicants from your years of reading admissions files and from working with student veterans?
Last pieces of advice. Leave yourself enough time to do these applications. Again, this conversation really is tailored towards the student looking for that highly selective school. And if you're not looking for that, that's totally fine. We can still help you get where you want to be. But if you're looking for that highly selective school and you know that this is a part, you're willing to do the legwork to get there, leave yourself plenty of time to do everything that you have to do. We didn't touch on essays or some of those other pieces of the application, but those also require a lot of thought and intentionality. So take a deep breath. You can do it. We're totally here to help and guide you through the whole process, the whole timeline. You can always reach us for help.
And for more just absolute incredible insight, information, and knowledge from Annie, you can reference our first podcast together where we dispelled some admissions myths and common questions that we hear from applicants back in season 4, episode 10. So Annie, thank you so much for being back on the podcast this season. It's always fun when you and I get to just kind of sit and chat about trends that we're seeing in admissions. And it's just been incredible to work alongside you to support our student population. So I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for your knowledge that you impart on our applicants, and they are just so lucky to have you in their corner. So thanks
Thank
again.
you.
And for our listeners, we hope you'll continue to stick around for more episodes of the Service to School Stories podcast. That's all we have for this episode. Join us next week, same time, same place, where we share more Service to School stories. Service to School Stories is hosted by Sydney Mathis, Chief Program Officer, and Alec Emmert, Service to School CEO. Our podcast is produced and edited by our Director of Communication, Amanda Tobias. Service to School is a 501c3 nonprofit providing free college admission support to transitioning service members and veterans. Join us next week and follow us for more on your favorite social media platforms.